So I'm going to go live now. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Joined today by footwear designer Daniel Shirley. Super honored to have him join us today. We're going to be talking through just like, the industry, footwear design. We're going to be talking about Daniel's journey, his personal journey through design, his own experiences. Maybe we'll be gleaning some insights, some wisdom. So it's just an open conversation today. We're also going to be looking at some of Daniel's work. He'll be talking through some of the projects that he's worked on. And yeah, hopefully it's just super educational and useful for all of you out there. I just want to say, well, first I'll introduce myself. So I'm the design community manager for Gravity Sketch, and basically just connecting with all of you out there, doing training content, interacting with all of you, listening to what all of you are saying, what you're wanting from Gravity Sketch, that kind of thing. So it's a pleasure to meet and talk to great artists and designers like Daniel here. And I also want to say, if you have any questions for Daniel or myself, Gravity Sketch at large, just ask away in the comments. And when it's appropriate, I'll shoot over questions to Daniel. So if at any time you have any questions, just throw it up in the chat, and I'll throw it over to Daniel if it's a relevant question. Yeah, because we're definitely going to be looking at some of his work, and so I think that'll probably be a good time to find out a little bit more in detail. So don't be afraid to ask. But without further ado, I'll shoot it over to you, to Daniel, for a quick introduction, if you just want to tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. First off, just want to say thanks for having me. It's an honor to be with Gravity Sketch, and hopefully stuff that I've experienced will be relevant to somebody, and somebody will learn something that's helpful. Yeah, so I am a footwear designer. I just started with Puma Team Sport.
Looks like you got a little bit of a lag there with your video. That's okay though. We can wait on it.
Accessories, bags, and socks. And then I broke into footwear. So kind of want to talk about that journey with you guys.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Yeah, well, I think it. I mean, when we had a little introductory call, we were talking through some of your journey. So there was some stuff that you said that I think would be really cool for people to hear, just like your journey and just like finding out what was that. I would like to know like what that decision process was for you that you wanted to design footwear, what your early influences were, and why you started, and then how you actually got into the industry. And how that actually ended up coming into fruition for you in your journey.
Yeah. So we'll take it back to childhood. As a kid, I have an older brother who's an industrial designer, and he influenced me a lot because he was very like artistic, very creative. And as a kid, I really liked sports and I really liked art, and so I would like make these like. I made up like an entire alternate NBA and like designed jerseys for them and like made fake rosters and all these things. And like when I played EA sports games, it was always super fun to do like the custom teams. And actually I sent a shoe design to Nike when I was like 13. It was
awesome.
Paul Pierce signature shoe, because I grew up in Massachusetts, loved the Celtics at the time. But didn't like connect the dots that was like a thing that I could maybe do as like a profession or anything like that. But my older brother, Nathan, he kind of discovered graphic design, and he did a class there, and it kind of influenced me. This was in high school and secondary, and that influenced me to take a graphic design class. And that's when the first time it kind of clicked, where it was like, oh, I could get paid to be creative.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I was able to get into kind of the initial program. I went to Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, and was able to get into graphic design, kind of start taking like figure drawing, 2D design, digital photography, kind of like the core classes, and did that for the first year. And then my brother, who didn't get into graphic design but found industrial design, was like, hey, you really need to think about switching to industrial design. And I think most people who've studied industrial design, probably the same for you, Jaron, it's like we found it some way, didn't really know it was like a thing until later, or like just kind of like an interesting journey of finding it and into it.
Totally.
So thankfully I made the switch, and once I was doing it, I was like, oh, this is the thing that I like want to do, and that I probably wanted to do when I was little. I just didn't know. And I was like always aware of like shoes that my favorite basketball players are wearing, and whatnot. And, you know, I got Sports Illustrated for Kids, and there's that Vince Carter dunk in the dunk competition. He's wearing the and one Tai Chi's, the half and half shoes, and he's dunking, he's going between his legs, and then he won the dunk competition. And so like, I was always like aware of brands and aware of that kind of stuff, and was more interested in soft goods once I realized it was a thing. But my program wasn't very like footwear specific in any way. There was people from like that had graduated and had gone on to be footwear designers. But yeah, I took a sewing class because I wanted to learn how to sew so I could like make stuff. And so I took a sewing class, and then I was the only dude in the class, which is fun. And then there was another student, Aaron Puglisi. He and I were kind of the soft goods guys. And he's like, hey, do you want to make backpacks this summer? And I was like, sure. And so we took one of his sketches for this kind of like, let me go grab it real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know where I put it, but is this kind of like faceted triangle backpack? And so we figured out kind of how to make it, and then did a couple like different prototypes, and then kind of went back to school for our junior year. And people were like, hey, that's really cool. Well, like, what are you going to do with it? And we're like, I don't know. And so Aaron's like, hey, you want to do a Kickstarter? And I was like, sure, let's do a Kickstarter. So we ended up doing a Kickstarter, and it was successful. So it kind of like started this like backpack company thing. But that summer, he and I both got to intern with Puma in Boston. There was a Jason Raleigh who had gone to BYU as well, was a footwear designer there. So he kind of connected us with the recruiter and whatever, and both got to intern there. And so like I had an internship. It was mostly like color materials, kind of things that, you know, you do as an intern.
Right.
You know, just kind of stuff that needs to get done, and is giving you like an understanding of like, what's a product line manager? What's a developer? What's your like relationship with them? Those kinds of things. Anyway, so when I graduated, it was kind of like, you know, I want to keep getting experience. There was a consultancy in Salt Lake that had, you know, kind of a history of doing footwear and outdoor stuff because of the outdoor retail show. And so it's kind of like work on the backpack thing for free, and then work at the consultancy for experience and to pay the bills. And so for about 2 years, I kind of did that, splitting my time. Got to work with Cotopaxi in Salt Lake as well for a bit. But then I was like, it's time to get a real job. And so I was fortunate through, I think, some people that I had known and connected, networking guys. Like it's really important to talk to people and connect with them, because that's how you get interviews. That's how you learn about opportunities. That's how you build mentorship. I'll plug for mentorship later, but I got recruited to do socks design at Nike, which was, you know, a pretty awesome opportunity. Socks wasn't like on my roadmap, but it felt like the right thing to do, and I was excited about it. New technology, and also, you know, a lot of footwear is bringing in knit aspects, whether circular knit, flat knit. So I was at Nike for 4.5 years as a sock designer, and I got to work in a bunch of categories. So I was working on like World Cup, Nike teams, global football socks, working on like men's training, Jordan sportswear, and kids. So kids product is very different than like what, you know, the top tier athletes in global football are using. But yeah, while I was at Nike, I had opportunities to try and build that experience that I needed to be able to get into footwear. Because, you know, some of these programs, different schools, they have good connections and they get you a bunch of internships and whatnot, so that when you graduate, you've had, you know, 3 or 4 internships in footwear, and it makes it, you kind of have put in the miles to show that, like, you know, that it's more than just drawing a sketch or modeling something up in 3D. Like, how do you get from that concept to something that is feasible and is right for the market and is hitting cost and all those things. So I was fortunate enough to get to do some stretch projects where I actually was doing my job in socks, but then got to go do a project with another group within Nike. So like core performance, men's sportswear, and kids were the ones that I got to work with. And because I was at Nike, I realized that not everyone gets this opportunity, and that's why stuff like this is great, and stuff like Pencil and the Seed program and the Design Apprentice program in Nike, like giving more people opportunities to get into the industry and meet with people. Because, you know, not everybody gets the chance to go to a university that has a design program or even knows about it. Right. Anyway, so I was able to talk with lots of people. And so there's a lot of designers, a lot of design directors, creative directors. And I was able to go up to them and say, like, hey, this is what I want to do, and this is where I'm at. And they would give me feedback and help me to kind of see what I was lacking. Because when you're a young designer, you don't necessarily know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of like, you know, I'm trying, like, why isn't this like working? Like, you know, why am I not getting an interview, or why didn't I get that job? You don't necessarily understand like how naive you are, or where there might be a hole in your storytelling, or, you know, things that just, as you get more experience, you become more aware of. All that, if that makes sense.
No, yeah.
But I was fortunate because one of the guys that I had worked with in core performance, he had gone back to Australia, and he was like, hey, you should talk to Lee. And Lee was from New Zealand, and he was also at Nike. And Lee ended up becoming this guy who connected me with lots of people, and someone that I could continually go back to and say, hey, well, since the last time we talked, this is what I've done. And he'd give me feedback, and he'd push me to get weird and get conceptual and push boundaries and push myself more. And so one of the things that's a part of networking is like, not everyone is going to be your mentor. But if you find someone that you connect with and who likes mentoring, but a key thing to do is act on the advice that they give you. Because if you just come back every 2 months and say, hey, why am I not getting a job? Like, and you haven't done anything, you haven't received the feedback, you haven't, like if you're not doing anything, knowing something isn't enough. Like,
it makes sense. It makes sense. Like, you know, if you don't take the advice, or if you don't act on this new wisdom or knowledge you've been given, you know, it's pretty obvious why, you know, you're not making any more forward progress, because, you're not taking what you've been, you know, what you've been given to make your work better, make your progress, you know, make your sort of design sense better, all these things. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes sense. And it seems pretty simple and kind of obvious, but it's amazing how many people just don't do. I mean, I've been guilty of that before. I think
Yeah.
I almost feel like we kind of all go through it at some point. It might be a maturity thing. Like I feel like it's part of the maturing process as well of being a young designer is being more receptive to that feedback and also like acting on it.
Yeah. Especially if you're a young designer and someone tells you, hey, you have a long ways to go. It could be easy to be like, all right, forget them. I'm mad at them for telling me that I'm not good enough. That's how you like internalize it. Oh, they don't think I'm good enough. So whatever. Or,
Yeah.
always be gracious. You don't have to take every piece of advice that somebody gives you. But definitely if you hear multiple professionals giving you similar feedback, it's probably the right thing to focus on. Like,
Yeah.
hey, like your visual communication, like you're kind of missing like this aspect, or like, why don't you make it? Like, and that was one of the things that Lee encouraged me to do, was like to make my ideas, and it kind of helped me tap back into that student thing of, like creating form and mocking things up and prototyping. So kind of take that idea of the physical making. That was something that I enjoyed, and I think kind of set me apart a little bit from maybe some other footwear designers who are much better at rendering and producing these really, sexy, beautiful sketches. So I was able to interview a few times for roles within Nike, but they went with people who had more experience than I did. And I loved Nike and I loved living in Oregon, but I was kind of like, it's just me and my dog. There's no reason for me to feel like I need to stay in Oregon. And so I opened up my scope and I was applying lots of different places, and then Corona came and lots of things dried up. Or, I'd have a first interview and then like something had happened, like the hiring manager left, or they hadn't hired the hiring manager yet. And so the position got put on hold, and lots of different things. And on that note, another point in terms of like grit and like getting feedback and acting on it, but then also every interview is is for your benefit. If you don't get the job, like you don't get the job, but you now have more and more interviews under your belt of being able to present yourself with confidence, being able to be concise in your storytelling.
Yeah.
And even I've asked for feedback after not getting an interview or not getting a job, where I'm like, hey, like, where do you see opportunity for me? Like, what am I missing? Or do you have any recommendations? Because different brands look for different things.
Yeah.
So like a portfolio that I built internally for Nike wasn't necessarily the right portfolio to get me an interview with another brand that is not Nike, where they think about product differently, or they're trying to solve in different things. Nike can be very like progressive, future vision, kind of avant-garde concept, and another brand might be like, I want you to show me like, here's a performance problem, here's how you solved it. Like, I don't need this like esoteric storytelling stuff or whatever. But thankfully, a role popped up in Los Angeles, and I'm really grateful to them for taking a chance on me to come and be a footwear designer with them. So that was my first footwear designer role. Moved in the middle of the pandemic down to Los Angeles from Oregon. And once I left Nike, I started sharing a bunch of these projects that I'd kind of like kept in the closet while I was at Nike. And I was fortunate enough to get shared on Concept Kicks, one of my ideas, and they didn't have a design Instagram yet. And so they tagged my personal Instagram, and I started getting all these requests from strangers, and I'm like, my Instagram is just pictures of my dog and mountains. Like, this isn't what this is not the profile you're looking for. So I built a design Instagram, and some of the stuff that I had kind of hidden for 2 years, it was getting shared and whatnot. And so I kind of got plopped down into the design community of footwear design. And it was the first time. So my brother Nathan, who's an industrial designer, he was into VR, and he had a headset, and he's like, hey, check out this program Gravity Sketch. And at the time, you kind of do the thing where it's like, you like write your name in cursive in 3D, and you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't really see, like, anyway, he was planting the seed. So that when I got on Instagram later, I was seeing what all these designers were doing with Gravity Sketch, and I was like, I think this is the tool I've been missing to communicate my ideas.
Wow.
Because I was that like kind of physical maker. But it's like, oh, I have this idea for a concept, and I can like mock something up, and I can do a sketch, but I don't have like the next refined thing. And like I said, like my sketching is fine, but it's a lot easier for me to develop form in this way as opposed to this way.
It's like the closest thing to getting that handheld experience without actually touching it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the nice thing about digital creation is that you don't have a closet full of half-built shoe concepts that you have to throw away and put in a landfill eventually. There's no replacement for touching something physically,
right?
But I do appreciate that I can iterate all these things without creating the physical waste until maybe I'm ready to like, let's print this and then like make corrections to it or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of was like, I need to learn this program, and I kind of gave myself my own like briefs and projects, which I can show you in a second. But yeah, it kind of opened a whole new world for me, and a way to kind of work and a way to communicate. Because in the end, like that's what Gravity Sketch is so great for. Is like, let me show you my idea in a way that you'll be able to understand it. You're not like being like, oh, like I like here's the lateral and here's the top, here's the medial. Like, how do these all like, just as orthographic views. And so once I was sharing things, another, I guess, piece of advice is share your work. I know that it is intimidating when you see some of these amazing designers, like Vianney Nike. His drawing is like, it's incredible, right? And if you're a young designer looking at that, you're like, I can't do that. But to learn any skill, you have to be okay with looking like an idiot.
Yeah. Whether
it's an instrument, a new tool, a language, like you have to be okay sounding like an idiot or looking like an idiot.
Yeah.
Because you will be an idiot, and then eventually you won't be. So yeah, and
that's
then,
I like that little nugget right there. Initially be an idiot, but then eventually you won't be. I like that.
Yeah, you put in the miles, and you realize how naive you were, and you realize what your strengths are. And I think that's another thing to recognize is every person is different, and there are things that come naturally to us and things that are difficult for us. And if we can identify like our strengths and lean into those, that helps differentiate us from other designers. And so when someone's trying to hire a designer on their team, they say, I've got this kind of designer and this kind of designer and this kind of designer. I'm missing this kind of designer. I don't want more of what I already have. I want someone here.
Yeah.
And if you're that person that fits that profile, then you are going to have an advantage over other candidates, because you're the missing piece to the team. So whether that's like you're a strong conceptual thinker or you're a maker or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
That's a really powerful thing
Um,
because, like a really powerful statement because I've talked to friends of mine, I've talked to other people that I've met about like career and like getting jobs and like this kind of thing, and like that is a really true. That's something I've actually said myself. Is just like there is a place for you somewhere. Like you are someone's answer to their problem that they're having. You are needed on a team somewhere. You just have to find them, and um and you just the only way you do that is you getting yourself out there and being bold about the work that you have. Even if it's not perfect, um and just getting yourself out there. You will be found. If it's almost like it is kind of like a chance thing, but it's you could mix it with destiny. Like it's almost like you putting a bit of your like you know I'm putting myself out there, I'm making the moves, and and just knowing that you belong somewhere, and that they will find you as long as you're like making that effort. And it always seems to happen that way. If you're eventually, and it's different for everyone as far as how long that takes, um, and how long of a journey it is getting to where you ultimately want to be. For some people, that's not even working somewhere. That's something for some people that's like working for themselves. But just like,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
could you?
Um,
Well, I just want to ask you. Well, like, could you just expand a little more too on the networking side of things as well? I thought that was really powerful as well when you were talking about that. On just like something that I've realized is how important networking is. Not obviously just meeting people, right? But um, people remember you, and they remember interactions. And if it was, or even especially if you worked with someone, um, and you never know who that person is connected to, who they're going to talk to about you. I've just heard so many stories from other like successful designers and creative people, where maybe not even creative people, but just in general, uh, how this person they worked with, though it was a bad experience for them, they did good work for this person, and they said, you know, positive things about the experience, and that trickles and that gets around. Um, and you just don't know how things are going to like ripple, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But could you just expand on that a little bit? Maybe some of your own realizations with that, because I think that's really, uh, I think it's a really valuable piece of wisdom too for people to understand, is the networking power of networking, and just like
yeah.
really ultimately like what's important there.
Yeah. So kind of like leading into the idea of networking, I think what you put out into the world with your work is what people will see.
Hmm.
Like as I have started to do 3D concepts, people are contacting me about, it's like, oh, do you do freelance or whatever? Like they're seeing what I've done and saying, I like that. That resonates with me.
Hmm.
I want this person I want to work with this person. And so I think even a point of networking, like if you're trying to place yourself in the Studio Hagel, Helen Kirkham maker space, like make stuff,
Yeah.
and that might give you opportunities to then talk to designers like them,
Yeah.
to be like, because I think an important thing to do when networking is like, not that people are self-centered or egotistical, but like if someone just comes to me and says, hey, I want to be a footwear designer, like help me, it's like, I mean, yeah, I can give you some advice, I can give you feedback on your portfolio, um, but if you're a little more like, hey, like I love 3D footwear design and this is why, and I would really like opportunities, like oh, there's such thing as a 3D footwear designer, and a lot of companies are building teams like that. I can be more helpful in terms of like, hey, this is a possible job you could do.
Yeah.
Or do you know this person? I know this person. Let me intro you to them. Because like, not everyone is willing to talk to students or talk to, a professional who's trying to break in or is trying to get their next role. But a lot of people are. Even if it's just one time, they may not be someone that you can continue to go back to, and it takes some like awareness of like who's down to talk to you more than once and become a mentor to you. But I think it's really important to just be genuine and be sincere, and like do your research. So like hit up designers, whether it's through LinkedIn or through Instagram, or whatever, TikTok. Like, you can connect with these people because you have that kind of like direct, it's like, oh, like I know this designer, like I saw this person on Instagram, or I know they work there. And I'll slide in their DMs. Like, anyone's welcome to DM me. I might not have answers or always like the time to be helpful. But I always try and be helpful, because like one of the things that I really benefited from was all those people who were willing to look at my portfolio and give me useful feedback. And that's something that I will always do for students, professionals, like even somebody who is more, has more experience than me, is like, hey man, can you look at my portfolio and tell me what I'm missing? Like, even that, it's just, I think the footwear design world is small.
Yeah.
And if you are a jerk, like, you're going to have a difficult time being successful in the footwear design world, because it'd be like, oh yeah, I worked with him at Reebok, and yeah, you don't want to interview him, like, or yeah, I interned with her at Under Armour. She's awesome. You should like you should talk to her, like those kinds of things. And so in some ways, like, you don't want to be a good human because you're afraid that no one wants to hire you if you're not a good human. You should be a good human because you want to be a good human, right? But like, like, this is something that you don't necessarily learn in school. Is like, you're learning all these skills in school, and you're doing these class projects, and you're like, oh, I want to get an interview. Like, an interview in many cases is just a design manager being like, do we like this person?
Yeah.
Like, they've got the skills. You can see that, like, they can do the work, but like, are they like annoying, or are they really insightful? Are they like are they funny? Are they dynamic? Like, what are the things that we're looking for in our team? And I think in a lot of cases, like, if you're getting an interview, like, it's, and if you don't get the job, it's not because they don't like you as a person. Sometimes it's like, well, this person has more experience, like, don't take things too
that's
personally.
important to differentiate a little bit, maybe, but
yeah.
But yeah,
but like, I just, it's important to be someone that is seen as like grateful when you give them feedback. And yeah, I mean, shoot your shot. Like, the worst thing that's going to happen is someone's just going to ghost you and not reply. Yeah. And I've had experiences where, like, I reached out to somebody with the name of somebody else, like, hey, so-and-so told me to reach out to you, and nothing. And then I emailed them like a year later, hey, like, how's it going? Nothing. And then, like, I ended up working with them. Like, we were both at Nike. And then when I met him in person, he's like, awesome, super helpful. He just was bad at email. And like, I couldn't have known that until like I met him in person. Right. Like, so, shoot your shot. If somebody doesn't reply, then like, it's fine. Move on. And, but yeah, every conversation will be good, even if you feel hurt by it or something. Like there's putting in the miles. That was one of the pieces of advice that I got as I was trying to break into footwear.
Yeah.
The design director in kids was just like, you just need to put in the miles. Like, you got to do more,
Yeah.
just keep doing more. Yeah.
You're guaranteed. I'm telling you, if you put it in, you're going to get something. Like, I know that sounds kind of generic, but just, I mean, it may not be the dream outcome right off the bat, but it's going to be a step to it. And what's really cool, what I like about your story, and it's I've heard it with other, designers and people that I've talked to, is just like, it seems like there's these opportunities that lead to yet another thing. And obviously in the moment, you don't know where it's headed, but you have that vision, you have that goal, and your constant vision, knowing where you're going, combined with you willing to do the work. It's like the doorways unlock, as you progress. Like the levels in a video game kind of like, kind of unlock for you as you get through. And it's just amazing to hear like everyone's specific, almost like everyone's video game, like what their video game experience has been, if I could give an analogy to it. But yeah, super insightful stuff there. I feel like we could talk like for hours just about these types of things, honestly, because it's just, it just goes so deep. But I do want to give you an opportunity to show some of your work. I know that there's probably people wondering some of the stuff you've done. I mean,
why should I listen to this guy?
No. Like I could talk about this type of stuff for like another hour, couple hours. Like this is something that these are conversations that I wish I had more of when I was younger too. I mean, I'm not like a super, not super old or experienced designer, and even now, but just even like when I was in school and stuff, it would have helped a lot. So I'm just hoping that anyone listening is, taking some of what Daniel's saying and taking it to heart, because it's definitely true. I can confirm all this stuff. So, but you've got a lot of cool work. We already have links in the description of to your Instagram and to your Behance as well. So some of you may have already checked out Daniel's work, but if you haven't, we're gonna give Daniel a chance to just like talk through some of his projects that he worked on. And then I want to say, if you have any questions for Daniel, please just shoot it in the chat, and I'll shoot it over to him when it's appropriate or if it's relevant. We'll just do it like that. So I'll let you take it away, Daniel.
Cool. I wanted to say one last thing that I think kind of is an overarching point to the stuff we've been talking about. Whatever you want to call it, like diligence or grit, there's going to be lots of reasons to feel discouraged or take a different path. But like, I think one of the most important things is you're getting feedback and you're getting rejected and ghosted and all these things. It's just like, how much do you really want it? And not in like a, inspirational quote, like if you want it, like work for it, whatever. But like, if being a forward designer is incredibly important to you, like prioritize it and stick to it. Because for me, it took years. I think I applied for almost 100 different jobs over a couple years, and to varying degrees of, and now I'm in a position where I've been able to land a full-time role in footwear that then made it easier to get other opportunities for footwear. And now people, recruiters, if a recruiter's coming to you, it's obviously an advantage versus you knocking on their door. But yeah, and not to say that like anyone who wants to do it can do it. Like it is difficult. There are privileges that make it easier. There are connections and those kinds of things, but like grit, like whether it's footwear or whether it's like a goal of learning any skill or hobby, or, you know, developing your character. Like, it's just like prioritize it and keep working for it.
Yeah.
And have the grit to just keep going for it. So
Yeah, that's
I
really
can
good.
can share a project, because like you guys can kind of see my experience here. It might be tiny on your screens, but um, yeah, I started to get into gravity sketch because I felt like it was um, this skill that was filling a need in my toolbox. So I just started like giving myself these briefs, or like, oh, I had an idea of like, oh, what if this, like, what if this brand did this? And then I would do it. Or, you know, so one of the, I think one of the gaps in my portfolio at the time was kind of like showing like a performance need and a performance solution. Um, and I don't have access to like a research lab, whatever, for like the biomechanics and the aerodynamics, or whatever, but it's kind of like, okay, I want to show that I can take data, whether observational, and create a performance solution. And I want to learn how to sub desurface in Gravity Sketch. So like I gave myself this project.
Yeah.
And so, sorry, the image quality is a little weird. The files are on a hard drive that I can't access right now because I'm in a hotel. Anyway,
No worries.
so
No
I kind of
worries.
started out like, okay, like, what are the different areas for ball strike? What are the different areas for acceleration, deceleration? And to use that as kind of a starting point. And so I had this idea of like, basically like the nice thing about engineered knit, like fly knit, prime knit, evo knit, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same, guys. I mean, there's some different machines and different patents and whatnot going on, but it's a similar process. But you can create one upper that has all these different benefits integrated into it. So I was like, you know, this mushroom leather, this mycelium leather is kind of like an up and coming thing. If you guys have seen, I think Adidas released something recently with Milo leathers. Anyway, I was kind of like, what if you could create basically a shell pattern, you know, and build in the texture and build in the areas of breathability, and then grow the mushroom leather inside of that jig.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's an engineered leather where you don't need to like emboss it and add padding and put holes in it. It just is that when it comes out. And then
Wow.
combining that with 3D printing, it's like, oh, like this is a more earth friendly, lower environmental impact boot. So that was kind of like the two things, like data, and then this idea of like growing an upper and printing. So I lived close to the beach when I was in Los Angeles. And so on the left, there's this abalone shell. And I found one. And it kind of like gave me this, like an aesthetic execution of a performance benefit. And something important to realize, if you want to do performance footwear, if you want to do lifestyle footwear, they're different. There are performance styles that eventually become lifestyle. But it's a little bit easier to kind of get weird and wacky in performance and say, it looks like that because it does this thing.
Yeah.
Like the Breaking 2 shoe had that like massive heel flare at the back, and it's like, that's not what running shoes look like. Why is it like that? It's like, oh, it's aerodynamic. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, like there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
And now everybody can do something similar. Anyway, so when you're doing a lifestyle footwear, cultural relevancy is the thing that you're measuring against versus maybe like a performance benefit. So it's important to kind of understand that designers can have both of those skills, but it's not just like, oh, here's a running shoe and it's lifestyle because it looks cool. It's like, well, it can look cool, but is it on trend? Do people care about it? Because, you know, the Roshi the Ultra Boost, like those came out at the right time to then become these like ubiquitous lifestyle. Anyway,
Right.
that's a tangent.
No, that's good though.
So I use this kind of direction, a little bit of like mushroom stuff in there, and kind of this like continuous surface. And so here's a look at what my gravity sketch mesh looked like. Got a little hairy. Again, this is my first time using Sub D. There's a lot of surfaces in there, and there are ways to maybe keep it a little bit cleaner, but just so you can kind of see like how I was creating some of these shapes. And then this was kind of the result. I took it into Blender and added materials, Googled how do you do an iridescent, effect in Blender? And some dude is like, here's the nodes. And then I was able to like take those nodes, like use YouTube, guys.
Yeah.
And then I learned how to animate. And so I'll post, a spinning model of my concept, because that's really the only way to kind of see it in 3D. But then I got feedback from some friends. It's like, your videos are too fast. Like, you need to slow them down. You need to have more frames so that we can like actually see what's going on. It's not this like headache spin. Anyway, so that was like one concept. And I wanted to say, okay, what if I take the same data and choose a different direction, a different aesthetic direction, and kind of like performance story. So this lobster shell that you see, you can see the inside of it and the outside of it.
Yeah.
I found again on that same beach area on a different day. And I loved how on the one side there was these kind of like speed knobs.
Yeah.
And then on the back side was kind of this like hollow thing. It's like, this is like what computational design is trying to do, right? Like this perfect, or this evolved crustacean. There's this meme, if you guys have seen it, it's like a lobster is more aerodynamic than a Jeep, and it shows like the aerodynamic lines on the lobster and how those bumps kind of like break up anyway.
That's cool though. Yeah.
So I went this direction, and again, like my sketches, for me on a lot of these projects, I just sketch it out enough to understand like what I want to try to do
right
in Gravity Sketch. And then sometimes I like completely change once I'm in 3D. So you can kind of see that there's like these like cutouts in the plate. And I ended up doing that and then being like, this is weird, this isn't right. And then I switched to this guy. So this Sub D surface is even more intense than the last one. These are all individual nubs. So it took a long time, and I think it turned out all right. But there's other ways to, kind of start to get into surfacing and whatnot. But just to kind of give you like a peek behind the curtains of like what it looks like. And then obviously once it's been,
that's really cool,
kind of made fancy. So same data, slightly different approach, different.
You could almost mistake this for being kind of generative, like computer, like like AI generated or computer generated patterns, but you did it by hand, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I mean it helped that I had these like zones that I had, highlighted of like, this is where this thing needs to be more intense. This is where it can be more subtle. This is where it needs to break and whatnot. And then kind of a quick, I have two other projects, but I'll probably just share one of them. This is for, this is like a project where I was like, what if Crocs did a marathon shoe? That was kind of like the first thought. And so like the point of this project that I gave myself was to build my skills, but just to have fun and get weird. Yeah. Like, it's just fun for me. And I like Crocs, and I like single material shoes. Yeah. Because I think they're part of like sustainability and circularity. If it's one material, it's easier to then turn back into one material and make into another shoe versus, all the parts that you get on.
Right.
Anyway, so like Croc is a cultural icon. It's unapologetic, it's expressive, and it hasn't changed. Like that's one of the reasons that makes it an icon. It's been the same for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So I felt like there was a lot of room to play where Crocs, you know, you're seeing like Easy Runner and Merrell stuff, and even Alex, some of these fashion brands are getting into this EVA molded shoe. It's just like Crocs has the most credibility here. They've been doing it the longest. Like they should be the ones releasing the Yeezy foam runner, right?
Yeah.
And I know, anyway, so I just felt like they can be unapologetic. They can have new expression, and it would be unexpected. It's like, oh, like Crocs is doing this. And like they have cultural relevancy. Like they do those collaborations with entertainers, and they've done some really great stuff with like beams and these kind of like collaborative projects with the classic clog. Their designers been doing a great job. Anyway, I was kind of like, there's these three aspects. There's the cultural trend of comfort and convenience, like clogs and mules, like pandemic shoes, right? Everyone's just like, lace them up. I'm not gonna waste my time lacing. Then there's this kind of performance trend where you see this kind of like extreme cushion for these marathon shoes, and you know, Hoka's been doing it for a long time. And then there's kind of the unexpected, where these other brands are doing a pretty good job of exploring, you know, what an EVA shoe can be, and elevating it. Because a Croc, you know, it's like $45. It's, you know, it's a cheap, it's an affordable shoe.
Right.
So I was like, let's go to Crocodiles for the inspiration. Like let's bring in some of these cues from Crocodile. I like, as you can tell, I like going to nature for aesthetic inspiration. And again, like some of my sketches were kind of like, you know, like I kind of want it to be like this, but until I'm in the 3D, I won't really understand what's going on. So I usually like bring in a last, and then I give some parameters around it with my sketch, and then just model for hours, and kind of came up with this. So like, it's a fun project, cool. and people are like, oh, like that's weird, or like that's super cool. And real quick, this is the other project. It was Adidas, and I was trying to get an interview. They said, hey, can you do this project? And then if we like it, we'll interview you. I didn't get interviewed, but this project has led to a lot of people reaching out to me. So like I'm saying, like sometimes you do something and it feels like a failure, or that the effort is wasted. But this project has been the project that got someone to reach out to me a few times, where it's like, wow, hey, like we want to talk to you. And I was like, okay. So the point being, it's like, effort is not wasted, and everything that you're doing, whether it's now or whether it's in 5 years or whether it's in a month, you're building your skills at the very least, or you're creating things that people will resonate with and want to talk to you about.
Yeah. That's a really, really cool point. It's a really, really important point there. And it definitely goes, I feel like it's similar in a way to the networking bit that we were on, which is less just like the idea that every work that you do matters. Everybody you meet, that every interaction matters. Every bit of work that you do matters. It may not, just because it doesn't pan out the way you planned or the way you imagined it would, doesn't mean it can't lead to something else or another avenue that you didn't expect. Maybe even discovering a whole new thing that you actually want to do, that you enjoy doing, that you didn't know was there. It could lead to whole new pathways as well. So that's another super great point. Just do the work and do it well, and do it to the best of your ability. Because it's almost like the effort and the intentionality that you put in that project was evident, you know, like in the design, in the work. that other people notice that. Even though Adidas, whatever decisions that they made internally, like
Yeah.
it's still in the project itself, like, said something. I don't know if that's true. I don't know. That's just something
Yeah.
that I think, but
Well, I think it's really easy to draw a concept and then throw a swoosh on it.
mm-hmm.
And we're like, oh, sweet, it's Nike. It's like, well, like, why is it Nike?
Mm.
Like, would it still look like a Nike shoe if it didn't have a swoosh on it?
Yeah.
And I think if you've done the work to understand the history of the brand and the athlete needs, whether that's on pitch or on the street, like if you've done that work, the thing that you make, the people who know and get it will see that because it's easy for someone to be like, and my brother and I talk about this, like, what if Apple made a car and then it's like this insane concept car, and I'm like, nothing about this is Apple except that you put the Apple logo on it.
Yeah.
Nothing about their ethos, nothing about their product. Like, this is not an Apple car, but like lots of people like, oh, like, it's so cool. And that's something to remember. That's like, likes are not that, like, yes, if a lot of people like it, it'll get in front of more people and that might get you in front of the right person. But if you look at something you've done and the people that you look up to, or the people who get it are the ones that are resonating, that's more important than having a bunch of people being like, this is dope. It's nice when it resonates with everybody. But the sincerity and the authenticity in yourself and in your work will show through, and the people that recognize it are the ones you want to be talking to anyway.
Yeah, that's a really, really good, really good point there. Like you what you just said there at the end, which is, if I could rephrase it, just like, like if the people aren't talking to you or reaching out to you or commenting, you don't need to be talking to them anyway. Like I feel like a lot of people really get lost on talking to a specific person or pursuing a specific route or a specific person or group of people, when they're not paying attention to the people that are talking to them or are giving them attention. It's like those are the stair steps that you can start walking on. And maybe eventually it leads to those other people that you like wanted to talk to, or those opportunities that you're going for. But it's like, it's almost like being open and fluid with the process and the journey, however it goes, and not being so locked in on how you get there, but really locked in on that vision, locked in on like that thing that you enjoy, that vision that you have. That's what will like carry you through almost.
Yeah. And I think it's really important because what we've been saying is like everything you do is benefiting you in your progression, right? You're learning something, and learning is the most important thing, right? Like that you're getting better and you're learning. I think sometimes people have this hyper-focused vision of like, I want to work for Kanye West and Yeezy. And just like, well, the designers that are at Yeezy have had careers before Yeezy. Stephen Smith, he did all this stuff for years and years and years and years.
Right.
So that Kanye was like, I want that guy. And so you are never like, no opportunity is below you. If you don't have any experience, right? Like if a small brand is willing to take a chance on you and give you an opportunity to make real product, like, don't be like, well, it's not in New York City, or it's not Adidas. Like if you want to work for Adidas, you have to have this, you have to get experience. It's not a lot of people like leave school and then go straight to one of the big brands. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people, it's like, oh, I worked at, this German outdoor brand for 5 years, and then I went to Adidas afterward.
Yeah.
Like, or I did my own thing. I was independent for a couple years to get, anyway. So
Yeah.
I
No,
just
no,
think that
that's,
like
yeah.
be open to everything.
Yeah. No, that's really, really good point. Um, I usually, well, I'll shoot you this. I'll say that I guess maybe towards the end, but I want to shoot you. We got a question here actually from Dawood Marion.
Yeah.
It said, he says, is it realistic to aim to get into designing in the industry without having gone to school for it?
That's a really great question. I will say that I think the openness of the brands for people who have not gone to school specifically is getting better.
Hmm.
I think that there are commensurate experiences in some way, like trying to get into pencil, or some of these programs where, like VF Corp is like focusing on improving like diversity in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like there are programs that exist that can help you. I, not to name drop, but I got to meet the now chief design officer of Under Armour when he was at Black Diamond, and I did a student project with him. And he told me years ago, he's like, I told HR to take off the thing where it said, 4-year degree or whatever. Just like, if someone's good, then they're good.
Yeah.
And they might have like worked for 3 years in something like similar and done all this stuff on their own and be better than somebody who went to school. So it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's not impossible. And I think that there is more openness and appetite for it within the industry, especially as they try and be better about hiring diverse talent. And that's like socioeconomic backgrounds, that's obviously gender and sexual orientation and race and all these things. But like, there's the age of the internet and the age of Zoom is making it, some of these things, more accessible.
Yeah.
I loved my education. I recognize that like university is not for everybody. Either it's not how you learn, you wouldn't be successful there, or the financial obligations of university.
Yeah.
So there are things, and if you want it and you work toward it, you may have to do jobs unrelated for a while, or you may have to do something that's like similar or like tangential. You gotta
get your training somewhere,
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah. And it's just like, because I had done an unpaid internship between my sophomore and junior year, that made it easier to get the Puma internship between my junior and senior year.
Yeah.
And that internship that I did was like, I mean, not terribly useful in terms of footwear and soft goods. It was something unrelated, but it was still industrial design, right? And so, just every opportunity to get some experience, get better, and kind of like, and I know not everyone has the ability to jump around, to have that kind of mobility, but look into programs, and hit up people who have done the programs.
Yeah. It's almost like what ultimately matters is just you taking what's available to you, and making the most out of it. So something will come of that. No promises of where it will go, but just taking what you do have, looking at what you do have, what you have access to, and just exploiting that to the most possible. It will go somewhere. But the whole education being needed for design, I think that's, or not necessarily always being needed, is really unique to, I think, just any kind of creative industry in general. Obviously there's there's a lot of prestige, with certain schools and things like that, but and companies tend to hire from certain places or whatever. But like you said, I feel like that's kind of shifting now in the age of Zoom. But obviously, like if you want to be a doctor, you got to go to school for sure. But so I guess that's my point. Is just like it's definitely kind of unique, I think, to the creative industries, where it's pretty cool. Where like there's a lot of different avenues to take, and it is more than other industries, more flexible to your life situation as to how you can get there, which is pretty cool. But
And I think,
yeah, go ahead.
in terms of mentorship, if you can find people through Instagram, through LinkedIn, whatever, who seem to have a similar story as you, whether they grew up in a similar place or whatever thing, where you're like that person looks like me, or
Mm-hmm.
they had an experience like me, I'm willing to bet 9 times out of 10 that person would want to talk to you and give you advice.
Yeah.
So shoot your shot.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Well, I was going to say this earlier, and we're kind of getting towards the end here. Usually, what I ask like a lot of the guests is just like, do you have any kind of nugget of wisdom that you'd like to give to the community? But I feel like this entire talk has been just all that. But I do want to, yeah, I do want to give you a chance. If there's just like one last thing that you want to say, some parting advice to maybe a young designer that's watching, maybe they just don't even know if they want to be a designer, but they just have questions, and not getting too specific. Is there any like wisdom or advice you'd like to impart on anyone watching?
Yeah. So one of the things that took me like a while to, I think, understand, that my mentor, I call him my mentor, I don't know if he would call himself that, but Lee just like pushed me to get weird. Like, because sometimes people will be like, hey, like here's this Nike shoe that I designed. And if you're Nike looking at that, you're like, yeah, it looks like the shoe that just came out. Like, we have people doing that.
Yeah.
Show me something I've never seen before.
Yeah.
And this idea of never seen before can be like, it can be tech, it can be ideas coming together for the first time, it can be, I've never seen color applied that way in a shoe, or I've never seen a silhouette like that, or I've never seen, like, I don't know, somewhat related, like when I was in school and I show my portfolio to people, it's like, yeah, it looks like every other BYU student's portfolio. You have the same projects. But because I had done the backpack thing, it's like, this is what this kid does in his free time. This is where his passion is. And so it's those things that start to differentiate you, where it's like, this is what I'm passionate about. That plus this idea of like do something, because like my personal taste tends to be like pretty minimalistic and clean and like Scandinavian mid-century modern, whatever, in terms of like furniture. But some of my footwear stuff is like, I mean, I wouldn't wear it, but it's interesting, I hope.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. You're not designing for yourself, and it's easy to do something like minimalistic. And not that like maximalism is the right thing, but like just try and make something nobody's ever seen before, because there's plenty of junk. There's plenty of garbage and waste, like to do the same stuff that everybody else is doing. Like, that's not adding value.
Yeah.
So show me something new, better, or different.
Yeah. That's a good one,
because that's where the value starts to come.
Yeah, that's really good. And I would
have fun.
Yeah. I would add on to that and just say, like, stop looking at Instagram, stop looking at Pinterest, and look at what's around you. Look at your environment. Look at, I mean, a lot of your references and your projects there were from nature, which is super cool. And I feel like nature is always going to stem new ideas, even though I've seen a lot of nature referenced projects, but people each interpret nature differently. So I feel like it's always going to be fresh.
Yeah.
And there's still like, nature's infinite. There's so many combinations that have yet to be, experimented with, but yeah, just like just to add on to that, like look at your environment, try and seek inspiration from your own life, things that are happening around you, because it's more likely that that'll be more personal to you, and probably being bring that newness, that new flavor to whatever you come up with. But we've got, I also see here in the chat, Delwood Marion, who asked about the designing industry needing to go to school. He said, thanks for that answer. Would you chat with me on a Zoom for you to ask more questions? So I'll shoot that over to you. I think probably you could reach out.
Hit me up on
Instagram maybe,
Instagram.
Or hit up Daniel on Instagram, and
just DM me and we can figure something out.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you very much, Daniel, for your time and for sharing your story and your insights. It was very, very insightful, educational for me, and I know for everyone watching. We've got your links in the description of the video if you want to go see more of Daniel's work. Last thing I'll ask, is there anything you want people to be looking out for, something that you got coming up that you'd like to point people towards? If not, it's no big deal. I just wanted to give you a chance to say it.
No, I mean, anything I do will be on my Instagram. So
cool.
If I do it, it'll eventually be there.
Cool. Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. And thank you everyone that's watched live. If you missed it in the beginning, just go ahead and rewind it now. You can watch it from the beginning. It'll also be available as soon as the live is over, and forever up on YouTube. So go ahead and rewatch it. And with that, I thank you all, and thank you so much, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
My pleasure.
See you, everyone.